Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Doing well until I read the news.
Yeah, that's always the case every day.
I kept looking for this wonderful revolution in the positive sense.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of nonsense going on, but there's still a lot of good people out there. And the battle has to be fought, and even though that's a dangerous word to say, I think most people realize what I mean when we want to fight it out intellectually and with honesty and try to solve some of our problems. But this one has lingered a bit. We want to talk about J6 committee ruling, and it was pretty bad that day. And then there's been investigation. Then there were the committee that was set up. It was so bad at the beginning. You know, it wasn't even bipartisan. They picked, you know, everybody knows how they picked two people who were Republicans in name only.
Yeah, exactly.
Are nowhere to be found now. But the story that we want to talk about is the report in the committee about you know, some shenanigans going on, and when they had somebody that would refute them, and that is the driver of the limousine for Trump, and I think the story was that Trump tried to choke somebody, and
take over the car,
and the whole works. And so it was a lie, and it stood. But the big story is the driver was the one that was the only one witnesses, and some of the reports came from people who weren't even there. But the committee was so evil that they wouldn't. They knew what they knew. There's pretty good evidence that they knew exactly what was true and not true. It wasn't like they were making a mistake, but they would not let the person that knew the truth. But guess what? The truth is coming out right now, and I guess I was looking for something good. Eventually, some truth can come out, and we do get some truth out of the matter. And it looks like they were probably every bit as evil as many people suspected, the way that committee was run. And of course, we had protection. The Republicans had protection by having two of their members of Congress going in it, and that turned out to be the farce of all farces. So anyway, this is good that the story is out, and you know, to me, the committee, commissions and things and studies are always, you know, even when they're more official and run a little bit more decently than this. This was so bad the way it was set up, but it sure got a lot of attention. And, you know, insurrection. There's been an insurrection. The country was taken over. Where are the guns? You know, how's it happening? There was an insurrection, but to me, the insurrection has been the people who were allowed into our country to undermine everything that we do and have free reign and get a free lunch out of the whole deal anyway. So that's probably where there's a bigger insurrection.
Well, let's put this first one up because Jonathan Turley, our good friend, wrote about it this morning. And it's very interesting because, you know, right after January 6th, I think you did your weekly column where you said this does not look like an insurrection. You and many others who said that were attacked. But every time a new story comes out, it undermines the central narrative. And narrative is what it was. It was about creating a false narrative that Trump and his supporters are so evil and so un-American, and they hate our democracy so much that they would stoop to an insurrection to retain power. And now, once again, one of the huge dominoes falls. This article's headline, Report January 6th Committee Delayed Secret Service Driver from Refuting False Limo Story. And we'll all remember this story. Our viewers will remember the story because it was so salacious. Trump is in his limousine after the speech, the short speech that he gave, and he grabbed the wheel and grabbed the driver and said, "Take me to the Capitol. I want to be with my supporters. I want to be part of the insurrection." And all of this came about because Cassidy Hutchinson, a 26-year-old junior White House staffer, she was called to testify in June of 22 before the January 6th committee, and she was called to testify, but she wasn't there. She heard it from someone who wasn't there either. She heard it from Deputy Chief of Staff Tony Ornato, that this is what happened. So she heard it from someone who heard it from someone, and then the guy who was driving the car, if you go to the next one, the guy that was driving the car, what's going on? So it turns out the guy, here we go, the guy who was driving the car saw the testimony and said, that's not at all what happened. I need to, bring me on to the committee and let me tell you what really happened because I was there. I was driving. Keep it up if you will. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit. So House investigators, now this is from the Just the News story that Jonathan Turley is writing about. House investigators obtained the evidence showing that former President Trump's Secret Service driver wanted to quickly refute the testimony about the alleged struggle, but the chairman and, as you say, Dr. Paul, the ranking committee members, they said, no, just take it easy. We'll have you later. And they waited months and months and months to have him.
Sounds like a cover-up to me.
It sounds like a cover-up.
You know, and it makes me think about the bigger picture that I've sort of tried to sort out in my own mind, and that is, do we have a republic? Has there been a coup? My argument is that we've had a coup. It's been a steady, it's a slow and different type of coup. It isn't the kind of coup that we participate in, to take over a government in Ukraine, that sort of thing. But there has been a coup, philosophically speaking. It's been going on for a long time, and I, of course, dated from the 1960s where it really got bad. But this sort of makes my point that the judicial system, and then when you add on the more recent things going on, the judicial system it's injustice is what it deals with, the injustice, not dealing out justice. But I'm also happy when we see something break loose here. And the truth is, and thank goodness Jonathan, has written this up so well, and he will get some attention, and maybe more people will think, because I think there's a lot of people who are disgusted with the system are very much aware of the 32 offenses. Is it 32?
34,
34 against Trump, guilty on all accounts. Is he going to go to jail and all of this? So that people are aware of that, but they're less aware because I think the Democrats were really in charge of the media, which shouldn't surprise anybody, and they have a lot of people have had the strong notion in their mind, well, this was different. There really was an attempt, and he wanted to change the election, right off. I keep saying about he's trying to take over and change the election. I said, why didn't they answer by saying, no, all we want you to do is count the votes. Count all the votes, that's all.
So Representative Loudermilk is the one now who's looking into the behavior of the original January 6th committee. And he's the one that released this information, and he continues to investigate it. Now, this happened just this week, actually just yesterday evening. If you go to the next one, this is from the Just the News article about what happened. It says, Loudermilk on Tuesday evening. Now, this is the important part, Dr. Paul, because you can just actually leave that up for a second. You used the word coup, and I think that is an appropriate and not an exaggerated word, but at the very least, you would say election interference. Because listen to this. Loudermilk on Tuesday evening decried the delay by the Democrat-led January 6th committee. This delay meaning they didn't bring in the Secret Service guy to refute this ridiculous story about Trump grabbing the wheel, decried the delay by Democrat-led January 6th committee, saying it kept Americans in the dark for months ahead of the 22 midterm elections. So right up until the 22 midterm election, keep it up here just for a second, please. Right up until the 22 midterms, they believed the first-hand testimony. They believed that Hutchinson's sensational hearsay narrative, as they call, that Trump tried to grab the wheel and violently take over the car, there was a refutation available by first-hand testimony, and they ignored it. So it's not a coincidence that leading up until those midterms, most of America believed that there was a crazed president with a crazed party trying to derail our democracy. Totally fake.
So it might not be a coincidence that they are going to find out what the penalty is to Trump 3 days before the Republican
exactly. They're still
Republican
doing
convention.
it. They're still getting away with it, and the Republicans seem to be helpless to do anything about it.
Somebody made a point, and I've made it since because I thought it was so right on, is people who do this, of course, I like the theory about looking for the truth in nihilism, but the way they do this is that people do this, and you wonder how can they do this with a straight face, and they're incapable because of their psychological and evil notion that they have no shame. And it's no sense of guilt. And that comes from no sense of right and wrong. And and that's one thing about Jonathan, why he's doing so well. He isn't somebody that come out and whatever we need to do, we're going to combat this because we got to get Trump, in there. He's not like that. He really looks at this objectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, where the Republicans, I mean, Speaker Johnson, maybe he'll write a strongly worded letter. He seems more interested in sending our money and weapons to Israel and Ukraine than taking care of this business. But so the other thing is, okay, so they didn't allow this guy to speak. They had her on just before the midterms, this young junior staffer, to make these crazy claims. Now put on the next one. So Hutchinson, this is the woman, young gal. A former Trump White House aide gave the account during nationally televised hearings in June 2022, more than 5 months before the elections. Now here's the kicker, Dr. Paul, but the Secret Service agent's refutation wasn't solicited until the day before the November election day, after millions of early ballots were cast. I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
All these coincidences.
All these coincidences. So it looks like election interference. They wanted everyone to think that this happened, and it didn't.
But in the age of technology, we're supposed to get our information more readily, and it would be available and give us the truth. But can you believe it? Yeah, I bet you can. That the government uses it to silence people and not get out the information. And fortunately, it's not 100% of everybody that's ever served there, because all you have to do is have well-placed individual, a well-placed judge, a well-placed congressperson, and on, and then well-placed people in the media, and then all of a sudden, they can accomplish a whole lot. They're an army among themselves to what they can do to compensate for and to counteract everything that the others are trying to do.
It does make you wonder why more Republicans, and there were some good ones, but why more Republicans inside the Beltway, in power, in politics, weren't stronger and weren't better at refuting this. They didn't want to be tarred with the brush that they were pro-Trump, so they cowered away in a corner and let this real injustice continue.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to, let's skip that next one and go to the last one, because we'll return to where we started, which is Jonathan Turley's write-up, and I think he makes a very good point, Dr. Paul, and I'm sure you read it. So, yes, here we go. So here's Turley's conclusion to this whole really sordid chapter. We previously discussed the highly scripted and entirely one-sided presentation of evidence in the committee. Indeed, witnesses were primarily used to present what Speaker Pelosi referred to as the narrative. She didn't even try to hide it, the narrative, where their prior videotape testimony was shown and they were given narrow follow-up questions. They at times seemed more like props than witnesses, called effectively to recite prior statements behind well-crafted, impactful video clips. It had the feel of a news package, which may be the result of the decision to bring in a former ABC executive to produce the hearings. They literally turned it into a propaganda video. So Turley concludes, that framing led to glaring omissions. The committee routinely edited videotapes and crafted presentations to eliminate alternative explanations or opposing viewpoints, like repeatedly editing out Trump telling his supporters to go to the Capitol peacefully. They edited it all out.
When they do all this, and they're pretty successful, and they win a lot of temporary battles. But when the truth comes out, my thoughts are, they're not very smart. I mean, they leave a lot of evidence there. Anytime anybody's willing to find it, finding it is one thing. Getting the people to believe it and converting the media to have an honest reporting is a different story. But long term, I think truth wins out. You know, sometimes I say, it's not worth it. But record it. Put the details down there. Someday somebody might be wanting to know the real truth of things.
But the thing is, once the truth got out, they had already won what they wanted to do, which is to make sure those midterms didn't go in favor of the Republicans. So, yeah, we know about it now. Thanks a lot. That doesn't help much.
Yeah.
So they win. Anyway, let's move on to another one. A little bit more corruption here. Go to the next clip. U.S. and Israel signed $3 billion deal for Israel to receive 25 F-35 jets, those great F-35s that we talk about. Lockheed Martin is going to get well paid. Israel's defense ministry said the deal is worth $3 billion and I highlighted this, will be financed by U.S. military aid, i.e. we bought the planes, not the Israelis.
So that's $3 billion. Let's get this straight. But they get $3.8 billion every year anyway.
Yeah.
So that's in addition. And then and the article goes on, Biden recently signed a bill that will give Israel an additional $17 billion.
Well, that's pretty good business.
I mean, there's a middleman.
Yeah.
There's a middleman that takes it off, but as long as they do what we tell them. And that was yesterday. I was making fun or cynical about this whole thing that, the president said you can go and bomb so-and-so.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's so upfront about directing the war, and that's why the American people need to wake up, because one of the propaganda things, and I think it might be in something where I mentioned, but this whole thing about military, the people who've been in the military, the veterans. Thank you for your service for saving our country. And that has always annoyed me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be discourteous because it's very sincere and there have been conditions, but it tells you how strong this conditioning is, why anything that they say is patriotic, you're supposed to roll over. Well, maybe I've turned it around because others have suggested maybe being willing to speak out about your government when the government is wrong, maybe that's patriotism. Maybe that's the true patriotism, instead of going along with people who take over your government and do evil things.
Yeah. And the thing about this F-35 story is that it's not necessary. We're not attacking Israel. We're attacking a very corrupt system that we have in the U.S. Because it's all about corporate welfare. It's the U.S. government stealing money from us, not directly, because they don't, they just take it out of thin air and they inflate it away, but taking money from our economy, giving it to a foreign country, giving it and saying, okay, here, you need to buy this stuff with this money. It's so corrupt. It's corporate welfare for Lockheed Martin. And it's the price that Israel has to pay for us to be their best buddies and turn a blind eye no matter what they do. But the other thing I was thinking when I was watching this, Dr. Paul, because for years we've talked about the F-35, we've talked so many times about its shortcomings that it has, that in a way, this actually kind of undermines Israel's security as well. Because who's to say that they're going to have a fleet of 75 F-35s when this is done? Who's to say that Israel really needs 75 F-35s for their own defense? Well, who says it is the U.S. government. If you want to be our friend, you've got to buy these planes. Nobody else wants them. And so they're forced to spend their money on stuff they may not even need.
Well, will there be repair people in Israel when they get the planes to take care of them?
Board.
So, there is a statement made, and I make it at times too. The wealthy get wealthier, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and maldistribution. And as a justification, for really attacking our system of freedom. The thing I read the other day was that capitalism is at fault. And this is why we have to have more socialism and fascism, because capitalism is so unfair. But to say that, if it's not corrected, it's going to be devastating. Because yes, how do the Boeing people plus thousands of other people get very, very wealthy over it. Is that a result of capitalism? It's one reason why I don't like the word just capitalism.
Yeah.
But it's an illusion. It's welfareism. It's corporatism. It's special interest. It's inflationism. But they say, oh no. But they've been able to use this. The system that we have, they just throw it out there and said, yes, you're right. You said it's not right. The distribution of wealth in this country is terrible, which is true. But they better understand it, because if they say it's due to freedom, which is what they're achieving right now, well, we have to get rid of anything that looks like their argument about capitalism and free markets and all that, when it isn't. That's just their excuse, because they're quite happy, the people involved. But that's also the reason why you see, the slums growing in number, and at the same time you see the very wealthy growing in numbers too. So that's why it's so important to sort out exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the last one we want to talk about, just want to kind of bring to people's attention again, we're always plugging antiwar.com. They're our great friends over there, and they do such great work. But they've got a great thing up there today, and you noticed it and sent it over to me earlier. Put up that next clip. Actually, it's the speech that military recruiters don't want you to hear, and it's Casey Carlisle, and it's really, we highly encourage it. We're reading it. Go to antiwar.com, but just go to the next one. Actually, we're going to skip this one. But this is a person. This is the speech that he gave. I was a high school senior on September 11, 2001, sitting in class, and stunned after hearing the principal said our country was attacked. And he goes on to talk about how he wanted revenge. He wanted to kill the people that did it. He was intent on joining the military and taking care of the people that he thought did it. And it turns out that he had a real wake-up call, Dr. Paul. He realized that things weren't as they seem.
Boy, that is for sure. And all of a sudden, the principle of recruiting and going into high schools, which I was always annoyed by, why are they going into high schools? And I was on the receiving end of some of that talk, off and on as a teenager. Why don't you go into the military, get into the military? But that is, obviously they have to use their propaganda and their fibbing on a wonderful future, and you're a hero, you're a patriotic hero, you're going to preserve liberty and peace in the world. And people, if you disagree with that, if you're in a community and say, we should not have military recruiters coming into our schools, and well, you could get into big trouble if you take that position. And unfortunately, though, the conditions are that, well, you're unpatriotic and we don't want to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I would say that our viewers may be hearing a lot of sound in the background. I just actually looked it up. We've got a severe thunderstorm warning, so we may get blown away literally here. We're gonna batten down the hatches. But yeah, I mean, it was a great speech. It's worth talking about. Just a little tidbit of what he had to say. Go to the next one here of Casey, what he had to say. So went to West Point, got a commission, went to the military, went to Afghanistan, and then here's what he said. I learned that not only were we not keeping our fellow Americans safe or protecting their liberty, we were further impoverishing one of the poorest countries on earth. Then he said he watched as disgust as the allies in the Afghan government were robbing the neighbors. And then he also said, my enemy, the Taliban, didn't do such things, which is why I ended up actually having more respect for them. And then they said, well, they were horrible, he said, and I'd agree, but it's much harder to kill an idea than to kill a person. And here's the part, and I knew you just mentioned, but I knew this is gonna jump out at you, and that's why I go to the next clip, that's why I highlighted it. So he says, instead of dismissing me as an anti-American lunatic, consider the following. In the year 2000, the Taliban controlled most of Afghanistan, and today they control all of it. That's just one of the reasons I feel contempt for those who thank me for my alleged service. Our service was worse than worthless, and the people thanking me were forced to pay for it. All of those who died there did so for nothing. And the innocent Afghans who were displaced, injured, or killed during our attempt to bring democracy were far better off in 2000 than they are now. That's a pretty stinging indictment.
When a weaker nation has to fight a strong nation, everybody looks at, well, a strong nation is going to win. They have a bigger army, they have more money, they have more troops, and it's duck soup.
Yeah.
And there was once a group of colonists that, decided that they wanted to be relieved of the oppression coming from Great Britain. So what did they do? They had a revolution, and they wanted their individual freedom. And they were able to do that. But the winner generally is who's in charge of the homeland.
Yeah.
The people who lived here and became the owners, philosophically and emotionally, that's what was going on with the Taliban. There's with a lot of things we would strongly disagree with the Taliban, but who's going to solve the problem? The people who live there have to do it, and if they have a neighbor that they're fighting with, and you've pointed this out, you deal with a neighbor and seal the problem. But when foreign entities come in and say we'll take over, they're weak, and they have natural resources there. And all of a sudden, they have their motivation. But I think it's very important, and I think when we see a breakout in this country, say with COVID and all, it's sort of a homeland stuff. This is too much, and there's some on the far left that literally said they will be very blunt. We can't allow the parents to determine what these kids are learning in school. And that has to be one of the ugliest things. But it also goes back, how did this ever get started? Did the founders say, the first thing we want is a Department of Education.
Yeah.
And we'll have that and make sure everybody is educated and know what freedom is all about. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I think the homeland principle is very realistic, and a lot of times they can beat all odds.
Yeah, and Casey got his education the hard way. And I love this last part, if we can put this last clip up, because this is something that you've said so many times and it's so important. To be clear, the desire to serve one's country is noble, but we first must define country. Serving one's country is entirely different from serving one's government. They're not the same. This is basically what you were just saying. Serving one's country is serving one's family, friends, neighbors, and the land they've made home. Serving one's country is serving one's community. Serving one's government, however, is ultimately what everyone does when they enlist or when they take my path as an officer. It's kind of sad, but...
and you mentioned a little bit about this, when he was experienced 9/11, and he had to make a decision, he said he had one of two things: join the military and go kill them, and or do it more professionally and go to West Point.
Yeah.
So he picked the latter. And although he wanted to go to Afghanistan immediately in 2001, it took him a while to go through school and get the training and become, a military hero. By 2009, then he finally gets sent to Afghanistan, and that's when his real education started. That's when he changed his mind. He said, my time there radically changed my views, which was uncomfortable, but as with failure, discomfort breeds learning.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we've had some supporters of the Ron Paul Institute, friends of ours that did the same thing when they went to Afghanistan, and they learned it's not what they'd advertised.
You're right.
So, well, I'm going to close out by thanking our viewers. If you see the like button over there, please hit it, whether you're watching us on Rumble or elsewhere. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the Ron Paul Institute. I have included in our description the link to get your tickets for our August 31st Dulles, Virginia, DC area conference, and we hope to see you there. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. I want to close by following up a little bit about the draft and why to me, it's a form of slavery. It's involuntary servitude. You'd think more people would say you shouldn't have a draft. We got rid of the draft, in the early 1970s. For a couple of years, we didn't have a draft or a registration. But toward the end of that decade, people said, oh no, we have to have registration to find out where these young people are. We might need them again. It looks like they're lining people up now already on how we're going to filter them in by the hundreds of thousands into Ukraine, to fight the next war. So they do this, and the draft the draft to me is involuntary servitude. But I think there's another one, and before 1913, there were a lot of people who supported this idea that taxing income, the stuff you earn on your own, should be yours. It shouldn't be automatically assumed it's the government. So I think the two things, the military draft and the income tax by the government, is involuntary servitude, because the assumption is once you have a draft, you're an involuntarily sent to many places. In the 60s, they were very bad. It was a very bad situation. A lot of people died because of this involuntary servitude, and some people wanted to see that as being patriotic. But there's also the IRS. The IRS and that whole system, it's based on the fact that when you earn money, belongs to the government. No, not after you do your form and take your deductions and you made $10,000 and okay, I'm going to deduct this and that, and I ended up with $6,000 and that's mine. No, the whole thing should be yours. What you earn is yours. And then the government then, after they look at it, they'll say, okay, we'll let you spend this much as long as you do this. It's sort of like how we treat foreign nations. We tell them what to do, and joining the empire, and we'll take care of you, we'll send you stuff. But if you don't, we're going to punish you. And that's what happens with the IRS. If you don't do it, you get punished, you go to jail for it. So this to me is so important, because the basic thing is, because everybody hates slavery, but what about the Constitution, where it's very clear that you're not allowed to have involuntary servitude? And that's what we are. We're involuntary servants, because people had been lulled to sleep by saying, well, there's a lot of people in need, they ought to have some help, and others say, yes, I do need help, and what we get from our government is no help whatsoever, which is true too, because we're on the wrong track, because the more freedom we have, the less problems we have with poverty. So if we want to live in a free and prosperous society, we do one thing: we restore the principles of liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.